On Monday evening, January 27th, there was a shootout in the San Elizario area, southeast of the Texas city of El Paso, right on the U.S.-Mexico border. But this wasn't your typical international conflict. The incident happened around 10 p.m. when U.S. Border Patrol agents stationed in Clint suddenly came under fire from the Mexican side of the Rio Grande. The agents immediately returned fire. Despite the tension and the fact that Mexican soldiers were recently attacked in this very area, no one was hurt in the shootout. And in fact, cross-border gunfire like this has been happening here every now and then for many years. The situation remains very tense. But what are the Mexican cartels actually doing at the U.S. border? And why can't anyone stop them? First, coffee. And then we'll keep going. An unobtrusive reminder for those who tend to forget to do that thing under the video, don't forget to do it. Bodies dumped on the side of the road, shootouts in upscale neighborhoods, trucks set on fire out on the highway, armed men dragging people out of their cars, and no one can stop them. This is what war looks like inside one of the world's most powerful criminal mafia organizations, the Sinaloa Cartel. Two factions are battling it out for control of a multi-billion-dollar crime empire. And there's an awful lot of blood being spilled. It all started right here in Mexico at the end of July 2024. That's when Ismael El Mayo Zambada Garcia, the godfather of the cartel and one of Mexico's most wanted men, came down from his hideout in the mountains. But he didn't do it for nothing. He was invited to a friendly meeting by Joaquin Guzman Lopez, the son of El Chapo, the infamous criminal, founder, and former head of the Sinaloa Cartel. Guzman Lopez invited El Mayo to come down to the city of Culiacan, from where he suggested they take a private plane to northern Mexico to check out some property. And the cartel boss, one of the country's most notorious and dangerous criminals, agreed. The elderly man, and El Mayo was already 76, boarded a Beechcraft King Air turboprop plane, having no idea the unthinkable had just happened. Betrayal. He, the godfather of the cartel, was tricked by the son of his former ally, and not just tricked, but kidnapped. A small plane flew El Mayo across the border into Texas, where he was picked up by U.S. federal agents. Just so you know, the U.S. government had put up a $15 million reward for help catching him. That's how the fugitive, a dangerous and hugely influential Mexican criminal who'd been on the run for decades, landed in the hands of American law enforcement. All thanks to a betrayal by another cartel member. No one really saw the kind of fallout this would bring. It's fair to say that the last few years have been relatively peaceful for the state of Sinaloa in northwestern Mexico. The Sinaloa Cartel ran the show here, and since it's a pretty tight-knit criminal organization, turf wars were kept to a minimum. Even the official murder rates here were lower than in many major U.S. cities. U.S. cities, not Mexican ones. But after the betrayal of Guzman Lopez, that illusion of calm came to an end. For about a month after El Mayo was kidnapped and arrested, the state of Sinaloa teetered on the edge, waiting to see if the cartel heirs could reach some kind of agreement, settle things, avoid bloodshed. After all, like I said, this is a tight-knit criminal organization. But then in early September, the cartel finally struck back with a monstrous wave of killings. And that was the start of an all-out civil war. I'm not exaggerating. Sure, the cartel has had conflicts before, and many of them dragged on for years. But the day-to-day intensity and ruthlessness of this new one were on a whole other level. This really was a war. And like any war, the war within the cartel brought serious economic fallout. That's something experts point out too. Like the head of the Human Rights Commission in Sinaloa State, these past few months in the city of Culiacan have been marked by constant, extreme violence. What we're seeing is a historic event, says a member of the local safety commission. We've never seen so many violent disappearances before. And given that many crimes go unreported, things could be much worse. At the time of making this video, over 1,000 people have been killed or gone missing, and that's just according to official reports. The actual number we'll probably never know, at least not for years to come. To stay somewhat safe, locals now enforce their own curfew, staying home after dark. Parents refuse to send their kids to school, afraid they might get caught in crossfire. And teachers themselves don't come to work simply because they're scared of being killed on the way or at school. The local economy was paralyzed. Many workers weren't showing up for the same reason. Businesses have cut hours or shut down completely because it's not safe. The state capital, Culiacan, has already lost hundreds of millions of dollars, and that number, just like the casualty count, keeps rising. The situation is nearing a humanitarian crisis, and people are forced to line up for food, again, risking their lives. This is what the main street of a big city looks like. It's deserted, because anywhere outside your house is a death trap. There's a known incident where armed guys pulled 2 local mayors from their cars and drove off with the vehicles. At some point, the Sinaloa police found a white van with "Welcome to Culiacan" written on it near a taco stand. Inside were the bodies of at least 5 men who, judging by the smell, had been killed several days earlier. And scenes like this quickly became common. In Elote, about an hour's drive south of Culiacan, even the oldest residents hide in their homes as soon as they hear convoys of armed men rolling through town. And they don't just hide, they lock themselves in, sometimes staying sheltered for days. In southern Sinaloa, many residents remained locked in their homes a month after the conflict began, and you can't blame them. Because in a war within a cartel, it's not the criminals who suffer first, it's innocent people. They get caught in the power struggle as both sides hunt each other down with reckless dedication. No one in the cartel thinks about whether their actions will hurt anyone outside the gang. It's kind of like collateral damage. Of course, the authorities tried to intervene. The federal government sent 1,100 workers to patrol the streets, and the army seized weapons from Culiacan's municipal police. This happened because there were serious concerns and well-founded suspicions that the cartel and local officers were in cahoots. General Francisco Jesus Liana Ojeda, who until recently was in charge of the armed forces in Sinaloa, even told reporters that the state's security doesn't depend on us, but on rival gangs stopping their clashes. And it's like there's nothing else that can be done. The warring factions inside the Sinaloa Cartel even have names: Los Chapitos and La Maiza. As you might guess, the first was founded by El Chapo's sons, while the second is led by El Mayo's son. And both factions are just as powerful as they are dangerous. Going up against them is damn hard. For example, on October 21st, Mexican forces got into one of the deadliest clashes of the decade, leaving 19 cartel members dead and a high-ranking La Maiza member captured. And on October 28th, the small plane allegedly linked to Los Chapitos dropped 4 bombs on Vascogal Durango, a stronghold of the Cabrera Sarabia organization, an ally of La Maiza. And it's all like that. You can't arrest or even take out members of one faction to calm the other. They're ready to fight to the death. Oh, and yeah, they've actually got a plane and bombs. This factional feud is a full-blown war. And despite the government troops' efforts, there's no sign the violence will stop. Moreover, this violence is about to spill over the border into the U.S. Chihuahua, Sonora, and Baja California are Mexican states that have all suffered from the cartel's actions between 2018 and 2025. And since there's now a civil war inside the cartel, factions are scrambling to redraw their territories. And that's why violence in these areas is getting worse. Since El Mayo's arrest, the number of attacks and bombings by non-state armed groups has gone up. Drones have played a big part in this. By May this year, there were at least 15 incidents where armed groups used explosive-laden drones. That's more than double the number recorded in previous months. No wonder many officials are warning the violence between El Chapo's heirs and El Mayo could spill over into California, Texas, and Arizona. And right now, cartels are robbing trains at the border, straight out of the Wild West, but with modern tech. Since migrant traffic is slowing down and smuggling banned substances is getting harder due to tighter border control, Mexican criminal groups have to find new revenue streams. One of them involves looting freight trains moving through the southwest of North America. Over the past few months, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Arizona has charged at least 15 people for their alleged involvement in schemes that could have been pulled from an old cowboy flick. In these schemes, trains suddenly stop and get robbed, with the stolen goods hauled off to California or Nevada, and nearly half of the suspects facing trial are Mexican citizens from Sinaloa. Suspects use bolt cutters and saws to break into compartments carrying valuable goods like shoes, toolkits, and household electronics. Along the way, they sometimes accidentally damage food containers, making the contents unsafe to use. But that's just kind of collateral damage. Once on the train, the thieves pull out their phones and call their bosses in Mexico, who then reach out to the American contractors they hired through word of mouth or messaging apps. Next, GPS coordinates are exchanged, and then things heat up. The cartel accomplices grab the same gear they used to get to the cargo and disable the moving train's air brakes. Once the train grinds to a stop, the goods are unloaded and stacked near the tracks, and soon the contractors show up. Usually in SUVs and pickups, sometimes in rented vans. They scoop up the loot and haul it across state lines to friendly retailers in California. Well, what about the U.S.? Are they trying to do anything about all this? Actually, a few members of Trump's new administration have suggested deploying U.S. Special Forces to take on the cartels. It's supposed to be like how the U.S. used to fight terrorism and crack down on insurgencies overseas. But so far, it's all just talk, because the cartels have serious retaliatory capabilities. Throughout Mexico's history, they've shown time and again an insane ability to adapt and hit back against perceived threats. It's worth understanding that Mexican cartels aren't just criminal organizations. They operate like militarized groups with deep financial resources, global supply chains, and complex logistics networks that stretch into the United States. So it's extremely unlikely that these huge, sophisticated cartels would just sit back and tolerate attacks from the U.S. military. Instead, as history shows, they're very likely to retaliate, not just to defend themselves, but to go on the offensive. There's a pretty widespread belief that they have serious terrorist capabilities. And since cartel operatives are already well established in the U.S., it's anyone's guess how far this war could spill over into American territory. And even though people have tried to wipe out the cartels before, it's never worked out. Actually, things have only gotten worse. Shortly after Felipe Calderon became Mexico's president in 2006, he declared a war on banned substances and deployed the military against the cartels. But instead of reducing crime, this led to a sharp escalation of violence. The cartels retaliated by attacking law enforcement, military personnel, and government officials. At one point, an entire police unit of 20 officers resigned after a series of attacks that killed the police chief and 5 officers in just 3 months. Officials were also murdered at any time of day, anywhere. Besides physical violence, the cartels also used psychological tactics. They publicly displayed their murder victims to instill fear in ordinary people, and it worked. The population was truly terrified. Another attempt to do something about the cartels happened on October 17, 2019, when Mexican forces arrested Ovidio Guzman Lopez, the son of El Chapo. Don't confuse him with the one who betrayed El Mayo. El Chapo has a lot of sons, and it seems like all of them are involved in cartel business. So the Mexican authorities arrested Ovidio, but the Sinaloa Cartel immediately retaliated. Using armored vehicles, machine guns, rockets, and other heavy weapons, around 700 cartel members launched large-scale attacks on civilian, government, and military targets across Culiacan. 56 inmates at the city prison started a riot, took weapons from the guards, and escaped. These events went down in history as the Battle of Culiacan, or Black Thursday. In the end, Ovidio was freed, the cartel took 8 soldiers hostage, and the authorities had to back down. The president at the time fully supported his release, arguing it would prevent more killings. And that's pretty much how it's gone throughout Mexico's recent history. Cartels keep hitting back against anything they see as a threat to their business, and they saw a threat not only in the authorities' fight against crime, but also, for example, in the work of journalists. Some years, Mexico's been even deadlier for reporters than active war zones. Overall, given these examples, it's not hard to imagine how the cartels might react to cross-border U.S. operations, and most likely that reaction would play out on American soil. Besides, any U.S. military campaign against the cartels will only succeed if it's backed by a solid partnership with Mexico's government. Obviously, without Mexico's approval, the U.S. can't do a thing. Otherwise, it'd be seen as an invasion of a sovereign country. Not to mention, the U.S. should be ready for potential blowback from the cartels on its own soil. Everything needs to be carefully calculated to figure out if the war against the cartels is worth the legal, political, and diplomatic fallout it'll bring. As for the Mexican authorities, they're in no rush to cooperate. Back in February, Mexico's president warned the U.S. that the country would never tolerate an invasion. Can't say that reaction surprised anyone. And we can actually imagine how the cartels would respond if the U.S. decided to wage a full-scale war against them. Of course, the cartels wouldn't just sit on their side of the border waiting to be attacked. No, they definitely strike the states from within. And those very networks that are now used for the illegal substance trade in major cities like Los Angeles and Chicago, as well as rural communities, would give the cartels the infrastructure for potential counterattacks. It could even mean terrorist tactics against politicians, law enforcement leaders, and even military personnel. Don't forget the cartel's deep ties to Chinese underground banking and U.S.-based gangs. All this could easily smooth the cartel's operations on American soil. And by the way, besides physical attacks, cartels can engage in cyber operations. After all, it's 2025. Mexican cartels are increasingly turning to cybercrime, hacking into government and commercial institutions to further their criminal interests. Plus, cartels use police databases to track and target their enemies. All of this could lead to panic and destabilize society so much that Americans themselves would call for an end to operations against the cartels in Mexico. And above all, here's the key thing nobody remembers. Mexican cartels are really strong. Sure, the U.S. Special Forces are among the best in the world, but the Cato Institute reports that Mexican cartels might end up being just as tough, even if cartel guys look like regular criminals. After years in the game, Mexican cartels have gotten their hands on all sorts of high-tech weapons like assault rifles, rocket launchers, drones, landmines, anti-tank gear, and grenades. In a propaganda video circulated in 2020, members of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel were allegedly posing with military armored vehicles. There have also been recorded cases of cartels using surface-to-air missiles, and intel suggests they've actually acquired anti-tank rockets. So it turns out that fighting them will probably look a lot like what U.S. troops faced in Iraq and Afghanistan. Ambushes, hit-and-run attacks, gang members will use their knowledge of the terrain, something special forces clearly won't have enough of, even if the fighting happens on U.S. soil. What's more, cartels are active in crowded city neighborhoods too, making military ops harder and putting civilians in danger. But like you've gathered, the cartels don't really care about that kind of stuff, so yeah, it's complicated. You owe me a like. See you later.